Welcome back, listeners. This is again another edition of Lector Talks about learning, about instructing, about instructors, training organizations, and anything related to air traffic control training and training in general. Today, we are going to be talking about an important aspect and element of training, which is always in the discussion, that how do we create an appropriate learning environment for the students and trainees. So creating what sort of environment should it be where learning can happen? And we have again as a guest Julio Granda, who is Lector's virtual learning manager. He's an educational psychologist and he's an expert in all things about learning. So he is with us today. Hello, Julio.
Hello, Samuel. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
Great.
Good to have you here. So let's start. Let's talk about learning environment. Mm-hmm. What do we mean by this? Because learning environment can mean many sort of things. It can be the environment, the physical environment, mm-hmm. The buildings, facilities where we are, but it can also be like a mental environment. What does it feel? What is the atmosphere like? So there's many sort of aspects to it, but what do you think? Can you start off by having a definition about what do you think about learning environment?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, learning environment can be many things. It could also mean, for example, if we are talking about online learning, the environment, the learning management system, for example, in which is happening. But this kind of environment that we are talking about, that supports learning, it is kind of atmosphere, like a working environment. It relates to the relationships between people, how people feel at work or in their studies. It's more about that. It's not physical. It's like you said, like a psychological, like a mental, like a relationship kind of environment.
So there's a big social aspect to it.
Exactly. It could be also related more to the concept perhaps of culture, like how is the culture there in the organization or the training organization, the school. So that perhaps gives a clearer idea of the kind of environment that we're talking about. And this kind of environment that supports learning, it's already very related to what we were talking about last time about motivation, right? It's a place where people feel competent, accepted, that they belong, that they have control over their lives. But now we develop it a little bit further, right? So people need to feel accepted, safe to take, risks, and it's really important that they are able to express their concerns, their fears, their disagreement, ask for clarification, and so on, without having any fear that there would be retribution or embarrassment. If we're talking about students, for example, they can express their doubts, their concerns, their disagreements, knowing that peers or their instructors or teachers won't embarrass them for making mistakes or for saying something that perhaps it's stupid. They won't make them feel stupid. So that students, when there's this kind of environments, they don't fear participation because they know that is actually seen more than failure as an opportunity for learning, so that they have more ease to discuss, to share ideas, doubts if they didn't understand something that probably has been repeated many times. So they're not afraid of just ask once again. What do you think?
Well, that was tons of things already there, but well, that's the motivation is that makes sense. That's something we have been talking about before.
Mhm.
Things that motivate students, and when anybody, when an individual is motivated, the learning results are better, because if there's a drive, if there's the person wants to learn something and is
Mhm.
motivated, they will learn. So as instructors and as training organizations, we want to like foster that motivation.
Mhm.
We want to keep it up, and then like take down all the barriers which are hindering it. But now you took it a lot further
Mhm.
when we're talking about the atmosphere of participation and like worries and social aspects, like relationships to other people. It's not just about the instructor and the student. It's also instructor with all the other students, students with other students, even administration and management of the training organization, anybody working there.
Exactly. It goes at
Really?
many different levels. Yeah.
So in many of your points, you talk about embarrassment and punishments, and how I understand it's a bad thing that shouldn't happen. So there shouldn't be any fear or punishments or embarrassment. But
Mhm.
isn't that something that has been used in the old times a lot? So why is it now a bad thing?
Well, if you are afraid of, for example, disagreeing or just asking a question because you are afraid that your instructor, your boss, or whoever is going to embarrass you, then you just don't. So for starters, that just decreases your motivation for your work or your studies. And then you drag these issues. If you had some doubts, then you will drag them because you couldn't solve them because you were probably afraid of asking, or you just didn't want to participate because you know that voicing these kind of concerns or doubts or disagreements will bring you some sort of negative outcome. If it is related to work, then these kind of things can pile up and just again decrease your motivation, decrease your performance. So your clients or students at the end are the ones that suffer.
Of course, all of us know and understand you don't like to be embarrassed. It's not a nice feeling. And if you get a punishment, you don't want to get punished. That's why it's called punishment. It's a negative thing. You don't want to experience that. So if that is a potential, if that is a possibility of your actions, then you might not do the action in the first place.
Yeah.
If it happens so that you don't succeed, you're gonna be, punished. So that limits your options, or limits your participation.
Participation, creativity, interaction with others, all of that, which are really important also for learning. Because we're talking about punishment. Punishment not necessarily means that somebody's going to come and punish you. It could be any kind of negative outcome. You ask some sort of question and your boss or your teacher, your instructor makes a face or a noise like, ugh, like again, this guy with his stupid questions. So that is considered a punishment in this context that we're talking about, the environment also, right?
Yeah.
Next time I don't, because if they're going to look at me with that face, if they're going to make me those noises, I'm not going to say anything.
I'm not going to, and then you just keep that question with you and it doesn't get solved.
Exactly.
So and then as a result of that, you don't learn.
Yeah,
that really makes sense. So you should be able to encourage all the learners to ask questions, ask those difficult questions, ask the instructors to explain why. And if there's still some doubts, ask again. And if there's still doubts, ask one more time. So that asking is not a negative thing, it's a positive thing. Because this from my own experience, I know a lot of instructors who have told me that they hate students who ask why, who are
All right.
challenging them and questioning them.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, that
why
is.
why don't the students just do what I tell them? No, but they need to understand. They want to understand, and if you don't explain them why, then they won't understand. They won't learn it properly. They won't learn it deeply. So I'm always saying that we should encourage students to ask questions. And as instructors, we need to do the extra mile and trying to explain it to them so that it becomes clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this part of challenging is also very important for the environment. People or students will ask why, and that is important also for them to perform or do their tasks, understanding why they are doing it. They don't want to be just like a machine doing because that's how things are done there, and that's it. They really want to understand and know in depth why, because at the end, not all situations that will happen can be taught. So when they have a deeper understanding of things, they can apply that to a variety of situations that they really didn't learn during training. So that makes them better students, controllers, or workers in general.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with 100% on that one. And another thing is the making mistakes. We should encourage making mistakes and see mistakes as something positive, something that where you can learn from.
Exactly.
Right?
Opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. Again, from my experience, I've seen organizations where mistakes, especially when you go to the simulator exercises, and if there's a mistake, something that is maybe safety related, there's a punishment. It's a fail. You fail the exercise, and you get a red cross on your your sheet, your progress sheet, your reports. Yeah, exactly. And nobody wants that. And it was so clear when I saw the students that they were so afraid of having that safety related mistake that they didn't even try anything new. They didn't want to take any sort of extra risk in anything, which in a way it sounds fine.
Yes,
it's understandable. Yeah, of course, in ATC you shouldn't take any extra risks. No, it's high stakes. But when we're in the simulator, that's where you're learning what sort of risks you can and cannot take. So that's the place where you should try things and be able to live with it. So even if there is a safety related mistake, so what? As long as you learn from it. Of course, then it's a different question if somebody's making the same mistake over and over and over and over again, still not to be punished, but to be learned from. So as instructors, if we can take the mistakes and errors and things that go wrong, if we can take them as points of learning, then they actually become a positive thing. Mistakes become a gift.
Exactly.
It's great that you made this mistake because now it highlights a certain thing. So this and this point. So you can learn from it. And not as that's a failure. We're going to mark this on your report card. You're going to get a bad grade and maybe you're not going to graduate. Oh, damn.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be understood that that's just a normal part of the learning process, that it doesn't need to mean automatically failure. So, and then followed, of course, by feedback about those mistakes, especially if they're high stakes. Because if they make a mistake, and even if let's say that we have this culture that mistakes are okay, that there's no big problem about it, but if you don't get feedback about it, then it's not going to work either.
Yeah.
So they need to be seen as an opportunity, as a gift, followed by the feedback, and it doesn't need to have a negative connotation.
And this I think this is where the ATC training old school has some problems with. You know, because air traffic control training carries a lot of this sort of a bit Air Forcey, militaristic traditions.
Okay.
So there is a strong tradition that the instructor is God. You know, you listen to him. The instructor is the wise owl who has all the answers and knows the truth. And you as a student, you know nothing. You are lower than worms. You know, you will not challenge. You are not in a position to challenge anything an instructor says. And that has created a lot of instructors who, you know, they feel this way, that I am somebody, a person of power, and nobody shall, and what I know is the truth, and everybody should obey what I tell them. So there's a lot of this sort of very directive teaching involved in ATC training. There still is, we cannot deny it. Things are changing, and hopefully we can change it even further, but there still is this, the tradition is still alive.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. You mentioned directed teaching, so it means they just give the instructors, and the other ones, the students, have to just receive whatever the instructor says.
Yeah, so it's like positive. I give you the truth, and you have to accept the truth as it is, no questions.
And we also know from communication research that so this is also part of how to build this kind of environment that fosters learning. That in communication, the meaning is constructed through discussion. So that means that if you just are giving the information, it's not like a interaction or like a giving and receiving. They are not going to really understand in depth or just as well when everything is just given to them, instead of delivering the lessons in a discussion way. So that is also part of constructing this environment, that it needs to be in interaction, considering the other starting point and points of view.
Yeah, exactly. So you make the students also active. They are the active participants in the learning process. They are not just somebody who sits in the classroom and shuts up and just listens to the wise wizard who is there in the front of the classroom telling the truth of how things are done.
Yeah, and anyways, nobody will really like pay attention for more than 15-20 minutes.
No.
That's just how it works. After that time, I probably am thinking about something else already.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the old school feels this way, and the modern thinking about learning is exactly that the students are active participants. You are discussing. They can challenge. They can challenge the instructors. They can ask questions, clarifications. They can raise concerns. And that is difficult for the old school instructors. They are really not used to that. But that is needed, because if you don't allow that, if you don't allow raising questions, raising concerns, asking for clarification, if that is denied, that drops the motivation, and that drops also the learning results.
And involvement, right?
Yeah, involvement, exactly. Who wants to participate in an environment like that?
Exactly. So we again
the environment is really motivating.
Yeah,
The
it
instructors and
has
the training organizations have, let's say, the tools or the possibilities to create an environment that will make everything better for their students. There doesn't need to be great investments, like economical investments. It's more about a change of perspective, attitude. Just
yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean that you need to have a nice and shiny building with big rooms and lots of light and space. No, it's not that. It's just about how people interact and how do you see your students, how do you see your co-workers, how do you see your administration, anybody. It's an attitude thing that brings across this sort of inclusive environment where people feel comfortable to be in. So, and you actually mentioned the word that you have to feel safe. And that's it, isn't it? It's
Yes.
this sort of, it's a psychological safety that we're talking about. That
Exactly.
I don't have to be scared about being embarrassed or being yelled at or that somebody's rude to me. Because I don't like that feeling. So I don't have to worry about that. So I feel comfortable. Therefore, I can also perform better. And that's where better learning results also happen.
That is true.
Yeah. And just to clarify also from the old school way, because that has been done over the years, and people are arguing that, but what is wrong with that? We got ATCOs graduating from this old school system. Yes,
and
that is
I
true.
turned out to be okay.
Yeah, and I'm an ATCO. I was educated that way. I'm okay. Yeah, I'm not saying that people cannot learn that way, but how many potentially great ATCOs were lost in the way? People who said, "Screw it, I don't want to be in an environment like this."
Or did they really enjoy it?
Oh, did they enjoy it? Was it fun? Yeah.
Or stressful?
Because it doesn't have to be. Learning doesn't, and it shouldn't be stressful. I know it shouldn't. I'm not saying learning should be easy, walk in the park, just sitting around and everything happens for you. No, you have to put the work, you have to put the effort. But it doesn't have to be like a stressful, under pressure sort of experience. It doesn't need to be like tough. It also can be fun. You can enjoy it. And that's what we're trying to also create. It's not about entertaining the student. No, that's not what it's about. But it's creating an environment where students and everybody else as well feels comfortable to be in. But how do we then know if our workplace or learning environment is this sort of psychologically safe?
Well, you can think of many of the things that we have mentioned. For example, how much people or students, let's say, in your organization or unit can voice their concerns, their doubts, their questions without fear. Like, how often do they do it? Are they able to receive feedback? Can they really disagree and challenge the instructor? These kind of questions can tell you how safe this environment is. Are they able to suggest solutions? Will the instructor admit errors? Or because he's God and so on, then he never makes mistakes.
Okay, so you need to, if you have one sign of a psychologically safe environment might be that you have some sort of mechanisms where the students are allowed to ask questions and talk, with instructors, maybe management, administration, and to raise concerns, and where they can actually influence the way things are done in the organization. Is that right?
Yes, and they just freely express themselves.
But isn't that quite difficult to see or admit to yourself as a training organization, that it's easy to say that yeah, of course we do this.
You have to see basically who are at the bottom. That the students, let's say in a training organization, are at the end of the hierarchy, if we want to call it like that. Do they really ask just any kind of questions? Can they? How are mistakes treated?
I just heard you say at the bottom of the hierarchy, if there is such a thing as hierarchy. And that's an interesting way of putting it, because if the students are not there, there's no training organization either.
Mhm.
So in that
That is
sense, the students are the reason why you exist
Exactly.
as a training organization and as an instructor. If you don't have a student, you don't have a job. So that actually makes the student a lot more important in the so-called hierarchy of any training organization. The students actually are the main characters there. The instructors and other people in the organization are there to help the student, because that's the person where we're aiming all our focus on.
Mhm.
Isn't it right?
Yeah. So everything then, in this case, should start from them.
Exactly. So that maybe shows the shift that we're talking about. That if the student is the reason we're there, why would we treat them in a directive way? Call them stupid, embarrass them, punish them, where our goal is to make them succeed. So we want them to feel comfortable. We want them to learn the best way possible. So they have to be able to ask questions. They have to be able to influence in their own way of learning and learning processes. They are the
Yeah.
main characters. Instructors are there to help. So here maybe can also be something that you can think about in your training organization. How do we see our students? What is our approach toward the students? Do we see them as active, smart, curious, motivated people who want to learn this amazing job of air traffic control? Or do we see them as low in hierarchy, as stupid and somebody who doesn't know anything, who are not allowed to question anything, and whose job is to learn? Do we see them as somebody that if they didn't learn, that the student has failed? If the student doesn't make it in the training, then we blame the student and say that, well, that student was lazy anyway.
Yeah,
They were
it's so easy
stupid.
to give up
Yeah.
responsibility.
Exactly. So you blame the student. Well, the student was bad anyway, so it's good that they failed. Or do we, as an organization, do we see that, okay, oh my goodness, we have a student who struggled so bad that they didn't succeed in the training. What did we do wrong as training organization and instructors? What did we miss?
Yeah, what we could have done better.
Yeah, exactly. What did we do that didn't help that person to succeed? But because that was our job. That was our job to get that student through, and we didn't make it. Here is another shift in thinking between the old school and the modern thinking. How can we make it? So when we approach the learning and the student this way, it helps us see how we should interact with the student and how we can create an environment where we can create success for the student, or an environment where the student can be successful. Any other thoughts about psychological safety? a learning environment.
Yeah, so we have been talking about this safe environment then, but how can we start to create or to develop this environment? So of course, all organizations have some level of this. We cannot say that there's zero of this kind of safety environment in organizations. They all have some level, but how can you develop it a little further? So you can just try to be a good listener, right? Show your trainees that you are engaged, that you are interested, that you listen to them, so that they feel that they are cared for, like we said before in our motivation podcast. So they need to feel that you care for them. So also when having these conversations, discussions, or just lessons, you can ask them questions to confirm that you understand as an instructor what they are saying.
Yeah.
So listen carefully, listen actively, take care of your body language. Like I said at the beginning, one example would be not necessarily of a punishment, but if you make a face or just some kind of weird posture or sound when your students are commenting something, then that also conveys a message. So listen actively and take care of your body language. You can also focus when they make mistakes, not too much on what happened wrong. Of course, it's good to go through that, but that shouldn't be the focus. So just the solution, right? How do we make this better next time? Make them come up with those answers themselves if possible.
Yeah. So basically the reflection about what happened and why this happened and how can we make it better the next time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that already gives a message that the mistake in itself is not that important. It's what lesson do you get from that mistake and how can you improve next time? And then also you can include them in the decisions, whatever that concerns to them and their learning. Ask them for their opinions, their thoughts. They can also give feedback to the instructors. Not necessarily the instructor has to be the one that also gives feedback all the time. So that again influences the environment. The instructor can give me feedback, but I can also give feedback to the instructor.
Yeah, and that is really interesting and important to understand that actually you can also ask from the student, how am I doing?
Yeah.
Let the student tell you, the instructor, how are you doing your job?
Yeah.
Again, a big twist in the mindset and approach to make actually the student give feedback to the instructor about how they are instructing.
Mm-hmm. So that again will go to the hierarchy, if there is any, right? That will make it more horizontal than vertical. So then they are side by side, not on top of each other.
Yeah.
And
that sounds, that is really, really important and really new way of thinking. And I see many students are also struggling with that because they are not used to having that sort of, in a way, power of giving feedback to the instructor. Oh, how can I? Of course, the instructor knows he's an instructor or she's an instructor. But then again, you just lead with example, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You show them how it's done, and it's okay to do. Encourage your trainees to do it, so to go for it and show that it's okay.
You could tell your student your own analysis of how you performed during an exercise as an instructor and how you could have done that better. Probably they agree, probably they disagree, probably for them it was really good. Probably not. So you can also share your mistakes, your failures, your points to improve.
Yeah. So in a way, you can give like a little self-assessment about how did I feel that I did. You know, similar way that you make the student reflect on the exercise and their performance. the similar way you can assess your own and reflect on your own performance as an instructor.
Mhm.
And ask feedback from the student, because it's not a one-way street, it's two ways. It's cooperation, it's discussion, it's openness. It's not that the information comes from up to the bottom, it falls down. It's not like that. It's a discussion. It's more horizontal, like
Mhm.
you
Exactly.
mentioned. Great. But this sort of psychological safety or psychologically safe learning environment thinking, an approach to learning, to trainees, to training organizations, it's a new thing. And this is the sort of change of paradigm that is happening in ATC training at the moment. We are definitely not there yet. The change is still ongoing. It's not a quick change, but it is happening because the students are already expecting this. So we need to make sure that the training organizations also adapt to the modern students. We need to listen to the modern learners. Only that way we can create an environment where they can learn. That's all the time we have for this podcast. It was great talking to you, Julio. Great points, and I think it's really valuable to get this discussion out there and people talking and thinking about these things, because the shift has to happen anyway. Thank you, Julio, for all the points and the discussions that we had. This was all the time we have for this podcast. We'll move on to the next one, so stay tuned. Remember to keep our Lector's social media channels active. Follow them on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, even YouTube. Go and check our website, lectorconsulting.com, to see updates and join our mailing list to see all the current events that are happening at Lector. And we will be publishing these podcasts in the future as well, so they will keep coming. Thanks for listening. I wish you all a very good rest of the day.